Stacy Cole and Carol Hughes. We are taking over the reins of Murder in the Morning for this week. Tony is off having a good time doing some things. And we are back here dealing with the dirt and the mud and
And this
stories
story is like, this is one of those stories that just really rips my heart out.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to read it, or even discussing it's going to be difficult for me.
Yeah,
Anything that involves children is just really hard, and child abuse and murder. And this one I just don't get. I don't get it.
And I remember when this case came out. This happened back in June of 2023. And the case that we're talking about is an Ohio mother was sentenced to life in prison for her toddler's death. And it was, I wouldn't say that she had an active role in the death of her child. It was a more of a passive, unattended role in her child's death.
I'm going to disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I'm going to say this is a very active role, because when she left her child, for the amount of time she left her child, there was no other outcome. So she didn't put hands on her. She just slowly let her child die.
Yeah, and I will agree with you on that. This case
pisses me off.
Yeah, and it's going to piss off a lot of our listeners too. Kristel Candelario, 32, of Ohio, has been sentenced to life in prison without parole for the tragic death of her toddler. The sentencing was handed down by Judge Brendan Sheehan. It marks the culmination of this disturbing and horrible case that unfolded back in June of 23. Her descent into infamy began when she abandoned her daughter for a staggering 10 days while indulging in vacationing escapades across Michigan and Puerto Rico. The child's fate was sealed when authorities discovered her lifeless body sitting in a pack-and-play, marred by extreme dehydration and surrounded by filth. Now, I remember when Tony and I talked about this story when it first came out. Like, I've got 2 cats. Cats are pretty independent. You know, you can put out some food for them, some water, and you can leave for a couple days. You can't really do that with a dog, but you can do it with a cat. And I realize cats and babies are not the same here, but I don't like to leave my cats for more than a day because I just can't. My brain says, no, I need to check on them. Or I need somebody checking on them to make sure that there's no medical issues. And that comes from me being in the veterinary field for 8 years, where, you know, I know things can go wrong, and the older they get and all these things. I can't imagine thinking to yourself, I can leave my toddler for 10 days without food, without water, without diaper changes, without care.
But don't you know, if you're doing that, you will come home to your child is deceased. I mean, you have to know that. A toddler cannot be left alone for 10 days.
Well, even a 5-year-old can't. I mean, even if you gave him a box of Cheez-Its and a bottle of water, they still would be in trouble after 5 days.
And this woman just was like, you know what? I think I'm going to go on vacation. This is a great opportunity for me. What? And that's what she did. She went on this fabulous vacation. And like, I get freaked out. Like, I don't even know, speaking of cats, like if I couldn't find my cat or dog overnight, like I couldn't find my cat one day a couple summers ago for like 9 hours. I'm bawling. I'm like, where is she? But this woman intentionally did that. She went out of the country and went on this vacation. And why not find a babysitter? Why not call mom and dad and say, hey, because mom and dad, they were definitely, you know, at her trial being like, oh, she's a good person. We love her. And she made a bad decision. No, she should spend the rest of her life in prison. It's that kind of decision she made. So
absolutely.
Was that not an option? And if that's not an option, if you can't find daycare, you can't go. Period. That's what happened when you had a child.
Yeah.
You're in second. You're in second. The rest of your life. Like, that kid comes first every time.
Absolutely. I had a diabetic cat who needed insulin injections every 12 hours. The most that I was gone was maybe 16 hours. Like we were going to be late with one of his injections and try to move it, tweak it over the next couple of days to bring it back to the same time frame. And it would upend our plans. That's just how it works. If you take on another living individual, whether it's you adopt a child, you have a pet, you're babysitting for somebody, you've taken on that responsibility that I'm going to make sure that I sustain their life, whatever that means. You know, if it's an 8-year-old and you have to make mac and cheese for them and stick them in front of the television, or it's an infant and you have to feed them every couple hours and change their diaper. If you make that commitment, that's what you do.
And what about night after night after night, 10 nights, she goes to bed in Puerto Rico and she's on this
with a
fabulous,
full belly.
Yeah. And she's having fun. She posted a picture of herself on Facebook with a caption that said, "The time that is enjoyed is the true time lived." So basically, like, I'm enjoying my life. And so I'm truly living it. And while my daughter's dying at home. That is the most selfish, disgusting thing I've ever read. And so she goes to bed, she goes out, she's having fun excursions on the beach, she's going out for drinks, I'm assuming, and food, and not even like, shit, what have I done? Like, somebody's got to go check on my child. She didn't do that. She did not do that. She could have done that. She could have reported herself to save her daughter's life, and she didn't do it.
100%.
I can't feel bad for her. I feel bad for the little girl.
Well, you know, and it's interesting because Tony and I have discussed a lot of times, and I've brought this up. So to our listeners, forgive me if it's like, oh, I've heard you say this many times. But when in my years in the veterinary field, sometimes you'd see an animal come in who was coming in for euthanasia, and, you know, it just ripped your heart out. Like, this poor animal has been suffering. The people won't let them go. They've been suffering for a year or two with a medical condition that was never under control. And it was bordering on not abuse, but gosh, you know, this is not a good quality of life. So in that pain of letting somebody go or letting a creature go, there was a way to kind of look at it to mitigate some of the anguish behind the scenes. And it was, there are worse things than death. And if this little girl, it was a little girl, correct? Yes, daughter. If her dying, yes, a horrible death, spared her from years of abuse and neglect, as tragic as this was, maybe I'm glad it happened when it did.
But, you know,
does that make sense? It's horrible to say out loud.
But to me, if you have brought this precious child into this world and you are incapable of giving that child a good life, and you are so selfish that you would rather leave your child alone for 10 days, knowing full well that when you come back, that child's going to be dead. There's no way a child can survive 10 days on its own in a playpen.
No.
Why not give that child up for adoption? You know, this child could have gone on to live a healthy, wonderful life with somebody else. You know,
but we also know that these kids get stuck in the system and nobody vouches for them. Nobody protects them, it feels like.
But where were the grandparents are at the trial, and their statements about how, you know, she's this good person. No, she's not.
No, she's not.
And how are they not? And they have to be outraged, I'm assuming, by her actions. But, you know, I think I'd be like standing up there. I can't defend what she did, and whatever you feel is the right punishment for my daughter, give her that punishment. Because she deserves it for what she did.
And I just wonder if it comes under the category of, well, this is my daughter. I know she's done bad, but I still love her, kind of a thing. And I get that to a certain level, but she killed the child.
Well, the dad said Even though he is shocked by everything that happened, he's still giving moral and spiritual support to his beloved daughter. I ask for compassion, understanding, and mercy.
But she didn't give that to her child.
Exactly. Mercy? She gets mercy? Understanding? Compassion? No.
No.
She gets life in prison. That's fair.
And when those inmates find out what she did, she's going to get a lot more.
Start binging on all of our true crime podcasts right now through Apple Podcasts and get an ad-free experience when you sign up to be a True Crime Today Premium Plus member exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast dropping soon.
Press subscribe now.